was talking very closely with the Israeli president. And the Orientalist influence comes very clearly through his papers and the interviews he has with people. He makes it quite clear that there's this idea of Orientalists that the only language Orientals, people of the Orient, understand is force and violence and control. Not at all true, but it comes quite across very clearly that Sofer believes the same thing. He also thinks that Islam is synonymous with terror, a very Orientalist idea as well. There's a quote where he talks about how that peace cannot be accomplished because people who follow Islam are becoming the majority. Oriental stuff. Conclusions. Israel's familiarity in the West, genealogically, historically, all that, allowed them to take control of Palestinian representation in the center of historical knowledge, the West, profiting off the mystery of Islam and how Palestinians remain alien to the West. They managed to shape their historical narrative so that the dominant narrative would be that Israel were peacemakers and Palestinians were threats to democracy. And evidently, Orientalism was not just a tool to shape the narrative, but also was an integral part of disengagement, as shown by Sofer and the people who were working for Prime Minister Sharon. The relation of Orientalism to the decisions and historical narratives of the Israeli government during the Gaza expulsion was therefore one of inspiration and of historical verisimilitude. I'd like to end on a little point about liberation from representation. People like Bill Ashcroft and Edward Said, the main guys who write on Orientalism and how that affects people who cannot represent themselves but instead being represented, often say that the way to liberate themselves from representation by another group is to try to take back representation and self-narrate, the means of which is found in Western media, which is slowly becoming a reality today, but is pretty tough for Palestinians. So I have another solution that can work with that. It's about Palestinian Christians. I recently went to Israel at the beginning of the year and talked with a Palestinian Christian and stayed with Palestinian Christians. The guy I talked with, his name was Dr. Munther Isaac, and I attended a lecture of his, and I used his lecture, that's what the quote there is. So basically, with Palestinian Christians, the Orientalist, a person who engages in Orientalism, feels he knows the Oriental, the people of the Orient, and therefore can ignore them, which is very evident in the typical Zionist slogan, a land without a people for a people without a land, just a way to ignore the fact that there are Palestinians in the land. And it's very easy for this ignorance to appear justified when the Orientalist caricature of a Palestinian tends to be someone who's associated with terrorism and is from this land, which is just an archaic and savage reflection of the West, blah, blah, blah. So it's very easy, the humanity of a Palestinian is very easily lost in all that. So the whole point about Palestinian Christians is that they so clearly, they're a small minority, but they very clearly break the typical representation. So therefore, any sort of Zionist ignorance that remains just takes on greater absurdity. So this is a quote from Dr. Munther Isaac's lecture. He says, "Only after we Palestinian Christians speak about all the wrongdoings in the world, then we have the right to talk about our own suffering." So what he's talking about there is about how, since they're a small group, they can sort of easily be dominated. So Zionists would tend to say that, oh, you're an unreliable source if you don't first focalize your suffering through all the other terrible things that are happening, blah, blah, blah. Just a way to sort of muddy the bad things that Zionists may be doing in the name of, theology, because they believe the land sort of belongs to Jews by God. Contentious area, not in any way solved. But yeah, that's that. Oh, please don't walk away thinking that this is some anti-Semitic spiel. I definitely agree that Israel needs its own independent state. These particular people in government were just horrible and did a lot of bad human rights violations. So, yeah, finito.